I will say, George, I do think they do have a big skin in the game. That's why I think BlackRock and Blackstone and all the blacks and all the names and KKR. I think what ends up happening here is they've gone so far into private credit and what they call alternative asset management that if it does, the bubble does shift and AI doesn't pan out in the short run, you will see some of these funds fail. And if you see some of these funds fail, BlackRock is not going to do well. I mean, you could have a fund company, and not necessarily BlackRock, but Blue Owl. Blue Owl could definitely be one that goes out of business. So while it's not the same as, okay, they have their own money invested in the debt, they certainly have their reputation invested in the debt bubble. And so in many ways, they're trapped. They've trapped themselves, right, George? They've trapped themselves that, okay, you get halfway into a multi-trillion-dollar process, you can never pull out. It's all or nothing at this point. We got to go 100%, 1000% forward. If it takes another half a trillion, we got to find it. If it takes another 2 trillion, we got to find it. There is no turning around here. There's no turning around for BlackRock. There's certainly no turning around for NVIDIA. NVIDIA is all in on this as well. So I think it's gotten too far to the point that there just is no, you can't be honest about what's happened so far, but there is no exit ramp for them that doesn't look like a catastrophe for somebody like BlackRock and Larry Fink.
Yeah, it's turned into a Ponzi scheme. So they're just
like you said, the Jenga. There's just the one Jenga piece, and that's it.
Yeah, but again, to be clear, that Jenga piece doesn't make money. The business model of that one Jenga piece, yes, by the way, it's propping up NVIDIA as well. Everyone talks about the profits of NVIDIA, but all of their profits, which are real, but they're coming from entities that don't have a business model. So let's go back to the commercial real estate thing. So because that's something everyone can get their head around. And you've got NVIDIA, they're basically building the office buildings. That's what they do. So what they're saying is, hey, we've got all of these companies that need office space. And so BlackRock, why don't you lend to them and then we'll build so they'll pay us to build the building and they can either use that as office space or they can lend it out to someone else, right? The problem there is if the person that's buying the office, if their business is cash flow negative, they're not going to be able to make those payments to the BlackRock or whoever the lender is. And if they're buying that commercial real estate to lend it out to someone else, they're going to be lending it out to someone that also has an uneconomic business model. And at some point in time, there's just no cash flow in order to service basically all of the debt. And it's like the whole house of cards comes crashing down in on itself.
Well, it's worse than that, George, because in the short run, the debt is the substitute for the cash flow, right?
Yeah,
because in the early stage of anything, cash flow always is a small, and it's a little part of it. So you borrow when you don't have the cash flow coming in, you borrow hoping that, exponential revenue growth, and eventually over time, you self-fund and you can pay back the debt. But again, the Jenga piece, I think, is a really good analogy because it is cash flow negative. It's actually moving the needle further and further away. So instead of getting them closer and closer to the goal line, it actually pushes them further and further toward the edge, which is, I think, one of the reasons why, again, I use the term desperate, which might be too strong, but maybe it's not. But the key here is you turn off the debt and what ends up happening? That's when the tower falls down because there's nothing holding it up except for a fire hose of debt coming in, which is why, this announcement from NVIDIA and BlackRock and all the rest of them, I think that's what they realize the danger here is if we don't have an unlimited source of funds over the next couple of years, they're cooked. They're toast.
Yeah, exactly. Another way I like to describe it is let's assume you've got this 21-year-old kid who has this startup and the startup is likely going to fail. And currently the startup is, let's say, hemorrhaging $100,000 a month. But the CEO of this kid's startup is the kid's dad, and he pays his dad 10 grand a month, right? So what's happening here, and the dad is NVIDIA, right? And the kid's startup is OpenAI or Anthropic or any of these other companies. So they're sitting there looking at the dad and saying, oh my gosh, you're making $10,000 a month and your expenses are only $2,000 a month. You're a fantastic credit risk. But then that's where the analysis stops. And they don't sit back and like, well, wait a minute, where's his 10 grand a month coming from? Oh, it's coming from his kid's business that is flushing $100,000 a month down or losing $100,000 a month. And they only have 6 months of runway. That's the easiest way that you can, I think, explain or understand what's going on here.
And that leads us into the credit default swaps and the growing anxiety in the credit cycle, right, George? Because A credit default swap on a company like Meta. Meta's not going to go bankrupt. That's not really the point here. You use a credit default swap on Meta as sort of a hedging tool for downside risk more broadly or more generally.
Yeah.
And so what we've seen over the last month and a half or so, going back to early July, I think it was right about when it turned, is that, again, like you said, CNBC is not asking the questions, but Wall Street and Wall Street investors are. And then what they're continuing to find is, all of these vulnerabilities. Therefore, the demand for hedging has risen incrementally, and in some places risen pretty quickly. Again, we don't want to overstate it. It's not exploding. It's not like the market thinks the world's going to fall apart tomorrow. But what it really does identify is a behavioral change in how people view the debt cycle. Before it was, you want some money? How much money do you want? I'll write you a blank check for whatever you want. Now they're saying, okay, hold up here. Not only am I going to ask some questions and maybe limit the funds, I'm actually going to start thinking about hedging my exposure to you, because as this continues to go along, the numbers get worse. The situation looks more dicey. We keep hearing things that don't pan out in reality. Now you've got this desperation move by BlackRock and NVIDIA. It's just these questions continue to pile up. So you can understand why in terms of the credit cycle, it's a very clear behavioral change.
Yeah. And when you look at credit default swaps in times of stress, or you look at credit spreads, it's not like they go from here to here in one day. They always start off with a trend, and the trend just gets worse and worse and worse. And if you just look at the parallels with every single CapEx bubble that we have had in the last, 300 years or something, they always play out the same way. And there's a reason they play out the same way. It's because we're all human beings, and we are hardwired today the exact same way they're hardwired during the railroads, and the exact same way they were hardwired during the .com bust. We're just, it's all the same software or whatever the hell's going on in our brain. And that's why these things play out the exact same way every time. I guess the end game is different, but as far as how the cycles play out, it's just put it on repeat. And, it's like that, who was it, Churchill, that said people who don't study history are doomed to repeat history or something like that.
I think it was Santiago.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing here. And, the problem is timing this thing. And the problem is this can go on as far as an investor. You can't go out there and just buy puts on Meta or buy puts on NVIDIA or something like that, because you don't know if this thing goes up another 100% before it starts to go down. Another way to say that is you don't know if we're in 1998, 99, or 2000, even though you know how this movie ends. And that's what makes it so challenging.
Well, have you noticed too, or at least maybe it's sort of an anecdotal type of development here, you've seen more and more people start to challenge the stock market. The credit cycle is one thing, and the credit cycle is in many ways driving, or at least it's the key risk to the stock market. We've seen, at least I've noticed, and maybe it's just a sample bias, but I've noticed more people who have come out saying, this thing, we're getting close to the top and this thing is going to go down. I agree with you. Nobody can ever pick the top. We have no idea how long it's going to run, but you do see some clues that, okay, the more people recognize that this is a bubble and it has a bubble pattern, the greater the chances as people wake up from the bubble pattern that it does end up leading to the other side in the bust. We've heard Michael Burry came out, was it last week, said, hey, I'm starting to get worried about a 1987 style repeat here. There's a lot of similarities. I forget who else came out recently. Oh, Norway, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, just today as we're recording on August 11th, the Sovereign Wealth Fund said, we're now stress testing our portfolio because we realize we can't get out of the stock market, assuming that it goes into a bust. And we think if the AI bubble pops, we'll lose 35% or so. And then the CEO of the Norway fund said, it wouldn't be impossible if our entire portfolio disappears. All 2 trillion of the biggest sovereign wealth fund in history. So it seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, and I really want to get what your perspective is on this. More and more people are starting to sound off on the marketplace as it gets further and further down this road.
My gut is that would insinuate we're only in the 8th inning and we're only at 1999. Because I think if we were in 2000, the parabolic move would be so extreme that the Michael Burrys of the world would possibly capitulate. Maybe not Michael Burry, because he's a bearish guy. He's kind of like I am. But you know what I mean? It's what I can liken it to is Lacey Hunt. I'm sure you know who Dr. Lacey Hunt is, and he's been a notorious bond bull for the last 40 years, something like that. And he just came out recently, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and turned into a bond bear. And when I see stuff like that, I'm like, maybe I should be buying along into the curve. We're specifically talking about treasuries. Because if you have the one last standing bull and all of a sudden he turns into a bear, there's no more sellers. Like everyone who's going to sell has sold. And then even if there's not that many buyers, those are the only guys left. And then usually you see yields go down. So I could take that both ways. I could take that as the market's kind of waking up. And I could also take that as because there's a lot of people waking up, then there's not a clear path and you're likely going to go up, or we haven't hit that point where you just go parabolic before the blow off top.
One thing I really care about with Eurodollar University Live is not the speakers. I mean, we like the speakers. But what we really care about is the people who are in that room, and especially the people who are sitting next to you as much as who might be speaking at any given time. There are only going to be 40 people there, and I want them to be people who are managing real capital, running real businesses, making real investment decisions, and who actually have something to contribute to the conversation. Because over 4 days, a lot of the value isn't going to come from me standing up and talking and doing PowerPoint presentations. It's going to come over intimate dinners, in the small groups, in the questions that somebody asked that you hadn't thought of, or meeting somebody who looks at the same problem completely differently than you do and might actually come to similar conclusions. That's why we're not just putting out a checkout page. We're talking to everyone before they come in. I want to build a room where you can sit down next to anyone who's there and know that you're going to have a conversation that's worth having. If that sounds like the kind of room you want to be a part of, apply below.